Welcome to the FF Forge. My name is Steve, and this is the waiver wire video. Just a couple of quick things. As far as the rankings go, I've come into a groove where I feel pretty confident I can get all the rankings up onto the website at www.thefforge.com. Link down in the description by Thursday. Somewhat early on Thursday, if I recall correctly from last week. So there is that. And I guess I lied. There weren't a couple of things. That's it. Week 5 just got put into the books here with Monday night ending. Let's begin with the quarterbacks. I think I can fit them all on here. As far as the waiver wires go, for the most part, everybody who is under 50% on ESPN is eligible for the list. And I just remembered the other thing. I wanted to put a little PSA out there as far as waivers go. Don't feel necessary to make waiver wire moves. Sometimes you have guys on your bench that are previous waiver wires that aren't making waiver wire lists anymore because they aren't a waiver wire guy anymore. They have enough ownership that nobody's pointing them out as you should go out and get them. Kenneth Walker is a really good example of a guy where if you have him stashed on the back of your bench, cat's going crazy if you can't hear. If you have them stashed on the back of your bench, you're not keeping them stashed to be putting up points. It's okay if they put up nothing on your bench. You are keeping them stashed for the event that a Rashad Penny gets injured. So just a little reminder, you don't feel like you need to go out and get some of these names. I will do my best to give some sort of opinion on urgency of getting guys as we go along here to help prevent people from making mistakes and going out and making waiver wire moves when they just don't need to. That being said, these top guys up here, well, I wanted to see how Derek Carr played tonight, and he played well. So these are a list of names of players that I'm seeing or guessing that people are going to be willing to drop. And so this is the order of how droppable they are. And as you can see, as we get down here to the Derek Carr name, you probably don't want to drop him. I think he had a pretty good fantasy night there in the end. It might have been average. Up at the top of the list, Geno Smith is really, I would say, the only guy that probably deserves a roster spot at this point. Out of the names up here, I guess it pretty much means that Trevor Lawrence, Stafford, and Russ are really the only names that you should be thinking of dropping potentially. Now, I do want to make a note on Stafford. He plays against Carolina next week. Not a bad matchup. Could be a bit of a get-right game. Then he's got a bye week. So there is a reason to be a little bit more comfortable dropping him. Then up against San Francisco and Tampa Bay the following weeks. Two good defenses. San Fran does have a few injuries right now. They're a pretty darn deep defense. They've had a lot of injuries over the past few years to major players, and next man up has worked pretty well for them. So I wouldn't feel confident in saying that San Francisco defense is going to be bad now without some of those players, and at least one of them could come back. I spoke a little bit on potentially a plan of moving Stafford, a way to move him in a recent previous video. So already really covered that. But the only reason that I would definitely want to be holding on to Rodgers for now is these matchups here. 3 out of the next 4 are pretty darn friendly for him. It's still an offense that may not be able to take advantage out of all 3 of those friendly matchups there, but still should be better days ahead there. As far as Goff goes, it's not the most scary of matchups. Does have a bye week, then going up against Dallas, not a great matchup. Then Miami, Green Bay, iffy, questionable matchups. You never know. I think what you're going to exactly get against those defenses could be really good games. And I would tend to toss this last week in as an anomaly, at least, so far. But obviously, don't have the full trust of Goff, so if there is a name that you like, for some reason more, he's droppable, but I wouldn't. And Derek Carr has a pretty darn nice set of matchups there, but not the best. Maybe a little bit deceptive as to how nice they are just by name quality there. We have said that Houston and Jacksonville defenses maybe we should take a little bit more seriously in recent history, so there is that, but Derek Carr is still just an all-right, solid dude. On to the number 2 waiver wire option, Jameis Winston, and a lot of that does have to do with the schedule coming up. Only 20% owned, that is what these percentages are. And that's a pretty, not a shabby lineup there. So if he can come back, be healthy, and be good, it's a bit of a speculative ad with Jameis Winston, but if things were to work out, they could work out real nicely. It could be a real nice ad. I should have mentioned for Geno Smith also pretty decent set of matchups. Not the best in the world, not the worst in the world. And then moving on to Teddy Bridgewater, I would say this is probably the most quarterback-friendly set of matchups here. Only 18% owned. That will probably go down, but I would expect to see him back next week, as there were no symptoms with his concussion. So not too afraid of that. Daniel Jones is my season-long ad, essentially right now. The schedule season-long is pretty nice. I want to say in the short term it's not excellent, but I expect that New York Giants offense to continue to get better and better each week. And Daniel Jones throwing at an average rate as far as just the quality and being a good thrower, just even at average, and then adding in his legs would make him probably a QB1, especially with how things are going right now with those back-end quarterback ones. So a lot of, I think, upside for Daniel Jones as a bit of a speculative ad. And then Carson Wentz here in at the last slot to add, 48% owned, and this in part just has to do with this matchup here. Maybe not the most quarterback-friendly matchups, and he's struggled in not great matchups. I thought last week was a good matchup for him. I just, as far as starting him and ranking him, I didn't have trust in him after he failed me recently. So ultimately, I've made the decision that I'm not a huge, I would rather have some of the upside of some of these dudes compared to Carson Wentz, despite what we've seen so far this season. So there's a bit of, I would say, speculation as to putting him this low on the list. Then going on, these are the true speculative ads, and in large part the reason that they're not making a waiver wire list for me is just due to rough schedules for these guys. So Zach Wilson showed a lot of promise in his first start and a half, we'll say. Kenny Pickett showed a lot of promise in his first start and a half. Zach Wilson had a lot more potential, had a middling game this week without hitting, with falling short of 2 passing touchdowns that were just right there, could have happened. He's a little iffy anyways as far as trust goes so far. And of course, Justin Fields is definitely on the iffy end of trust. But that offense seems to start to be figuring out what's going to work best for them. And Justin Fields actually had a pretty good fantasy week this week, and he's another guy with those legs will, really prop up a so-so passing attack, even a Daniel Jones-esque type fantasy player. Then for Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy G, Marcus Mariota, I think they're all solid streaming options, not necessarily guys that I would want season long, though. Moving on to the running back waiver wires. These are the only two that I really think that, especially in terms of fab, that, hey, you should be spending some money, some of that fab dough on. And Kenneth Walker being one of those guys where this is where when Jeff Wilson came up, and I underestimated him, I will admit, but this is the type of guy that I had in mind as far as save some of that fab, put a bit out there, but don't go too crazy, and hopefully you get Jeff Wilson, but you might not. Save some of that fab in case a season-long starter comes along who's going to be the for sure bell cow. So that's Kenny Walker. He will be the bell cow there. And Brian Robinson appears will also be a bell cow in, I would say, a less appetizing situation. A little more crowded still yet, too, even though it really seems like they're quickly there in Washington going to be just going to B-Rob and putting Antonio Gibson in some sort of specialty role. Already talking about putting him in as a returner on special teams. You don't really do that with your starting running back unless they're a rookie. And Antonio Gibson is not a rookie. And then here are the running back Rachaad White still have at the top of my list, because if Leonard Fournette were to go down, he would be another guy where you would want to just spend all your fab on. and he is getting some usage at least sprinkled into that offense. Maybe that work increases as time goes along. Zamir White, maybe it's a bit speculative, but I do believe that he would be the de facto number one running back there if Josh Jacobs were to go down. Mike Boone / Latavius Murray. So really the main reason that I have Mike Boone a little bit further down on this list, I'm not all gung-ho about picking him up, just comes to the mess that Latavius Murray could create. So that is a little bit of a, if you've heard things that I haven't heard about that situation where you would feel more confident in Mike Boone, or you would feel concerned about Latavius Murray to some extremes, you could move Boone up or down on this list. Really the last things that I heard about that would go back to like last week and some of the concerns that some people had. But Mike Boone looked good, and so for sure in the short term, if you just need somebody, he's a solid pickup that you can still find on some of your waiver wires. Then a much messier situation happening in Atlanta. Tyler Algier, Caleb Huntley were the starters this last week. Tyler Algier did have the larger load, but in 2 weeks, Caleb Huntley has really looked good in the slightly limited amount of carries that he's had compared to Algier. I do expect Algier to be the number one RB there. I guess the main thing is, how confident am I in that? Not fully confident. He hasn't been super efficient yet. Not super surprising, especially last week, but he has had someone perform over him. And then we got the veteran Damian Williams coming in, and how does that mess things up? I think Tyler Algier is a higher upside but higher risk pickup than Caleb Huntley, because I would say Damian Williams comes in and kind of takes over more of what Tyler Algier is going to be doing, and then Caleb Huntley's still the RB2 there. So concerns there. Benjamin going up against Seattle next week, so I believe at least solid matchup. It's even without knowing how good or bad Seattle is against the run, just my expectations for that game would say the running back in Arizona is going to have a couple of shots at falling into the end zone. Worst case scenario. The only issue for Benjamin is, from what I've heard, it sounds like James Conner is going to be a shorter term injury, like he might be back next week, depending on, it's either a 2 to 3 week thing or he's back next week. We probably won't have enough information to know for sure for waiver wires what the scenario is. Wednesday will probably be fairly telling, and then Thursday should be quite telling. So Benjamin is not someone I'm blowing my fab all over, but if you need someone for 1 week, he is going to be a solid waiver to throw out there with high upside, but he may not be viable also. So that's the risk. These are really just guys who, if something happens to the starter, I think they're having the best roles. Those are the types of running backs that I like, and to some different extents. I mean, Gus Edwards, who knows? That's a little bit risky. And Isaiah Pacheco is one guy I moved down a little bit on the list just because he didn't get any bit of use tonight. And I was already worried with where I had him, probably somewhere around here on the list. And of course, I had finally just taken Jerick McKinnon off of my list, and he had a pretty darn good night. Actually, just about ran the same amount of attempts as Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So, and he looked good. I don't expect him to take Clyde's role, though, just to be clear. Otherwise, he'd be higher up. And then on to the wide receiver options. Michael Gallup, George Pickens, Valdez-Scantling, all over 50% owned. This is where I was saying I didn't move Valdez-Scantling at all. I just wanted to point out that these guys are, check your waiver wires if they're still out there. They're definitely the best ads that you can have. Devin Duvernay, I earned some of my trust this week just as far as his role in that offense. They gave a lot of faith into him, building a game plan around him this last week. They may have also discovered a little twist and element that they can just add into their everyday offense, because I do think that was a very specific game plan that they used against Cincinnati this past week. So Devin Duvernay is, I think, still roughly who he was, but maybe earned a little bit of cred with the team and with the players, and maybe that results in even one more target for him in that offense a game is just one more opportunity for a boom type of game, or at least saving salvaging a mediocre day. Then Isaiah McKenzie / Khalil Shakir. So I think you're going to hear some Khalil Shakir talk, but that's Isaiah McKenzie's job. That said, I don't know, there's some iffiness there. I might even say Alec Pierce should be above them just for the security fact of his job's not at risk of anybody coming in, whereas Isaiah McKenzie's job, he could see some targets get taken away from him, and both of them have an increased value just due to that offense. If somebody goes down, much like what happened to Khalil Shakir this week, they instantly become viable options. If not, now we're going to have trust in Khalil on the next time that he gets a true opportunity. So yeah, that's that. Then Rondale Moore, Darius Slayton. I think I would put, for now, these three are up in their own little tier, or three, and Khalil's somewhere down here, are in their own tier. And then Rondale Moore, Darius Slayton, Romeo Doubs, Corey Davis, Joshua Palmer, Josh Reynolds, I would put all in their own tier. Rondale Moore might find himself sliding down here, but for now, if you need a short-term option, he's the route to go. That's going to be the same, probably is true for Darius Slayton, but there is more season-long upside for him than Rondale Moore. Romeo Doubs, similar. He's some season-long upside to him. He's a hold, if nothing else. A lot of people do have him on their teams. I think his ownership's fairly high. So if nothing else, he's a hold. Corey Davis, a little bit of a speculative thing, but he has been the primary target out of the main three wide receivers there for the Jets in the first 2 weeks back with Zach Wilson. Josh Palmer is still going to be short-term, but I think I saw something positive about Keenan Allen today, but I still have concerns about retweaking that hamstring and that potentially causing it to be another 2 or 3 weeks before he's back out there, but maybe not, in which case he would drop down, so don't go jumping for this guy. Josh Reynolds is in a similar situation where the more talent that is there, the less valuable that he will become, whereas Wan'Dale Robinson is a high upside, a season-long guy, but he's such a speculative ad. I like him more than Kadarius Toney is all I'm saying. So he is my Kadarius Toney ad, but I can't ignore the talent that is Kadarius Toney. I just am going by what the team has said to us early on in the season when they were both healthy. It was Wan'Dale Robinson, not Kadarius Toney, generally the idea. But they've had a lot of wide receiver injuries, so Kadarius Toney's going to get an opportunity to get on the field regardless, unless somebody like Darius Slayton earned himself a role over him this week. Always possible. Matt Collins we've seen some great boom for him. You can't ignore that. That's going to be a similar story here for Diami Brown, and he's a short-term option. He is not a season-long option. Then Mecole Hardman, Zay Jones, Sky Moore, I did move down a little bit because of today. Randall Cobb might get some interest this week. I wouldn't be too excited about that, but he's another short-term option. If you need somebody over these next 2 weeks, the Green Bay Packers are playing against the Jets and Washington, and there's definitely some upside there. And probably a fairly safe floor, given how Cobb has played these last 2 weeks. He has looked younger these last 2 weeks than he's looked for a few years. I'll give him that much. And then I would really put Noah Brown, DJ Shark, and Donovan Peoples-Jones down in their own tier of, you probably can't quite trust them, but streamer options for sure. So Jameson Williams, some news came out. Sounds like it's going to be longer. The hopes were that it would be after the Lions bye week, which I believe is this coming week. So week 7, that Jameson Williams might be coming back. The team's really just not too concerned about winning a Super Bowl this year, so they're not too concerned about getting him back as I think the main thing, and it doesn't look like he'll be back week 7. So it's becoming more and more concerning about is he going to be even useful once he is fantasy viable? Like, how long does that take? And then you can't start him the first week he's back. So yeah, you get the idea. Van Jefferson and Julio Jones, they said he was up in here, but they said that they're playing the long game with him, so I guess he's not coming back anytime soon. And Tyquan Thornton's just really on my watch list. Then for the tight ends, Evan Ingram, Cade Otton, Taysom Hill have as my 3 guys who should be on rosters, is the basic idea. A lot of people probably have Taysom first, Not everybody. If you're a Taysom Hill person, I'm not going to convince you otherwise. If you're not a Taysom Hill person, I'm saying you have some decent other options like Cade Otton or Evan Ingram that I like more than him. So take comfort in that. I should add Cade Otton is no guarantee. Cameron Brate could come back and Cade Otton could be absolutely useless at that point. I would say a better than not chance of that. Cade Otton's a bit of a speculative ad, but I talked about him last week. Love him. Said I thought he was a pretty good, viable option, and he turned out to be. So why would I not have him on my list? Then Hayden Hurst, I bluffed on, I missed on as far as last week goes, but Hayden Hurst, Logan Thomas, and Foster Moreau has made himself onto this list after tonight. Darren Waller had a hamstring injury, so Foster Moreau made it onto my list, and I do put him up in this same tier as Hayden Hurst and Logan Thomas for as long as Darren Waller were to be out. Mostly because the usage for these guys or the output is in question. So Robert Tonyan, Will Dissly, both not the most usage that is viable or viable on a week in and week out basis. Kind of need a touchdown from them for anything to be good. And Cole Kmet is on the rise as that Chicago Bears offense gets its feet under it a little bit. And he had a normal week for once this week. I believe he was a top 12 tight end this week, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but it doesn't mean nothing either, especially for a guy that we were expecting more out of. Then I have Daniel Bellinger, Irv Smith Jr., Tyler Conklin, Hunter Henry. I was concerned about Tyler Conklin, but wasn't willing to knock him too far down last week. In fact, I didn't really knock him down much at all last week, but said he was at risk of being knocked down, and boy, did I knock him down after he dropped 0 points this last week. Yucky. And Hunter Henry, maybe you could say he should be higher, but Johnny Smith will be back soon enough, it sounds like, and either way, he's in this tier of guys. Daniel Bellinger just has the most upside, I would say, out of this group, due to all of the injuries in that New York Giants offense and being a talented rookie who's getting a lot of experience right out of the gate here. So he's somebody who could grow into being a somewhere up here in this area of tight ends. Then Noah Fant, Mo Alley-Cox, Jelani Woods are also options if you needed to go that deep. Noah Fant keeping an eye on. They're really guys just keeping an eye on to see if something were to spark other than just straight up touchdowns making their weeks. So that is it for my waiver wires. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will get this out as soon as I can in the morning. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate you. I love you, and I'll catch you with the rankings videos. Take care. Bye-bye.